Good morning, you're listening to the brief wake up, your mindful start to the day. I'm Handel, your daily coffee companion, helping you wake up informed, thoughtful, and maybe just a little amused before the day gets old. If you're commuting, corralling kids, or just standing in line for caffeine, you're in the right place. Let's get you caught up. On the health front this morning, let's talk about something hiding in plain sight. Why junk food in the United States is chemically different from junk food in much of the rest of the Western world, and why that matters. Here's the surprising part. The same brand, the same packaging, but different ingredients depending on where it's sold. In the US, ultra-processed foods are far more likely to contain high fructose corn syrup, artificial dyes, and preservatives that are restricted or outright banned in Europe, the UK, and parts of Canada. Take food coloring. In the US, red 40, yellow 5, and yellow 6 are common, especially in foods marketed to kids. In Europe, many of those same products use natural colorants instead, or carry warning labels linking dyes to hyperactivity in children. Then there's sweetness. American junk food leans heavily on high fructose corn syrup, not because it tastes better, but because corn is cheap and subsidized. Other countries rely more on traditional sugar and often use less of it. Preservatives and texture agents matter too. Certain emulsifiers and shelf life extenders allowed in the US have been linked, not conclusively, but consistently, to gut inflammation and metabolic disruption. Europe takes a different approach. When safety is uncertain, they restrict first. In the US, ingredients usually stay legal until they are proven harmful beyond doubt. Now here's the key point. No single additive is the villain. The problem is volume and frequency. Over half of all calories in the American diet now come from ultra-processed foods. So even small biological effects get amplified when exposure is daily, lifelong, and starts in childhood. That brings us to the current debate. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has proposed aggressively restricting certain junk food ingredients in the US, pushing standards closer to Europe's. Whether you agree with him or not, the premise is hard to ignore. Companies already make cleaner versions of the same food, just not for Americans. And here's the takeaway I want to leave you with. This isn't about perfection. It's not about banning treats. It's about recognizing that food policy shapes health long before doctors ever get involved. You don't need to eat clean all the time, but knowing what's different and why gives you leverage. Because when the ingredients change, behavior doesn't have to. But biology always notices. That's your health segment for this morning. The news is next. In our news, we will address President Donald Trump's signaling a willingness to take action against Venezuela, along with his framing of the issue at hand in blunt terms, saying the country stole oil land and assets. To understand why that language matters, here's the historical perspective. Venezuela's oil industry was largely developed in the early 20th century by US and European companies under concession agreements that heavily favored foreign firms. In 1976, Venezuela did what many oil-producing nations did at the time. It nationalized its oil industry and created the state oil company PDVSA. Under international law, nationalization itself is legal, as long as fair compensation is paid. The real conflict comes later. Under Hugo Chavez, and later Nicolas Maduro, Venezuela dramatically tightened state control. Contracts were rewritten, foreign companies were forced into minority positions, and some assets were seized outright. Several firms argued they were never properly compensated. International arbitration courts often agreed, but Venezuela eventually withdrew from those systems and stopped honoring rulings. From the US legal and corporate perspective, that crosses a line. What Venezuela calls sovereignty, Washington calls expropriation without payment, and that's where the word stolen enters the narrative. And that word is doing real work. By labeling Venezuela's oil assets as stolen property, US actions such as sanctions, tanker seizures, and asset freezes can be framed not as intervention, but as recovery. It recasts economic pressure as enforcement, delegitimizes the Maduro government, and lowers the political threshold for escalation. So when Trump talks about taking action in Venezuela, this is the historical lens behind it. A decades-long dispute over sovereignty, compensation, and control, now compressed into a moral claim that justifies aggressive policy. The deeper reality is that Venezuela's collapse is driven less by theft than by corruption, mismanagement, and the loss of technical expertise, with sanctions accelerating an already broken system. But mismanagement doesn't rally power. Stolen assets does. The big sip is next. For the big sip, we discuss the myth of the prodigy. What does it actually take to become the best at something? For years, we've been sold a clean, comforting story. Start early, specialize fast, put in 10,000 hours, and greatness will follow. That idea was popularized by outliers, and it shaped how parents raise kids, how coaches select athletes, how institutions decide who gets resources. But a new paper published in Science tells a very different story. Across disciplines, from sports to chess to classical music, the people who showed the most promise as children were less likely to become world-class adults. Instead, the performers who eventually reached the very top tended to look average early on. They started later. They explored multiple disciplines. They didn't dominate youth competitions. They didn't look like prodigies. In fact, many of the best adults accumulated less early practice in their main field and more experience elsewhere before rising late and fast. In sports, this shows up clearly. Early peak performers often become the best for their age, but late bloomers surpass them in absolute performance years later. Why? Because people change, motivation shifts, interests evolve, burnout happens, bodies mature at different rates. Cognitive depth takes time. Excellence isn't just about repetition, it is about resilience, adaptability, and the ability to perform under increasingly complex pressure over a long horizon. This matters, not just for coaches in schools who may be over-investing in early stars, but for anyone who's ever thought, I didn't make the team. I wasn't the best in my class. I started too late. The data say, you're not behind, you're normal. Most world-class performers did not follow the prodigy path. So here's the sip to sit with today. Progress isn't always linear. Depth often comes from wandering, and your timeline does not disqualify your potential. If you didn't peak early, good. You might just be warming up. The lighter roast is next. For the lighter roast, this time of year, a very specific human glitch shows up. I call it the reflection avoidance paradox. It goes like this. You feel intense pressure to reflect on the year, your life, your choices, your growth. And at the exact same time, you want absolutely nothing to do with reflecting. You think, I should really think about this year. Then your brain responds, absolutely not. Let's scroll, or snack, or reorganize a drawer. That's the paradox. December's full of forced mirrors, year-end recaps, holiday conversations, old family roles, new expectations. The calendar itself is like, so, how'd you do? and your nervous system is like, we'll circle back in February. Here's the thing. Avoidance doesn't mean you are lazy or shallow or emotionally immature. It usually means reflection feels too big right now. The mistake we make is thinking reflection has to be deep, cinematic, and life-altering. Like we need a full documentary arc before January 1st. But that's not how real processing works. Healthy reflection is actually small. Instead of asking, was this a good year? Try, what's one thing that didn't break me this year that might have before? Instead of, what should I have done differently? Try, what drained me and do I want that again? And here's a big one. If you don't know the answer, that's okay. Sometimes the most honest reflection is, I'm tired. I'll understand this later. Another trap this season is confusing regret with repair. Regret just loops. Repair moves. If there's no realistic action to take, replaying it isn't wisdom, it's punishment. And let's normalize this too. Some things don't get closure. Some relationships stay unresolved. Some years don't make sense yet. That's not failure. That's being alive. So if you find yourself bouncing between I should reflect and I can't deal with this, congratulations. Your brain is doing something very human. The goal isn't to squeeze meaning out of everything before midnight. The goal is to stay honest, gentle, and intact. Reflection doesn't expire on December 31st. And sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is let the question rest. That's not avoidance. That's pacing. Our commemoration is next. Today, December 22nd, marks a quiet turning point. Depending on the year and where you live, today can fall on the Winter Solstice, the shortest day and longest night of the year in the Northern Hemisphere. For thousands of years, cultures treated this moment not as an ending but as a promise. From here, the light slowly returns. It's also the birthday of Srinivasa Ramanujan, born today in 1887, a self-taught mathematician whose work still shapes modern physics and number theory. His life is proof that genius doesn't always follow formal paths. And here's a fitting scientific nod. Today is often linked to the early history of the thermometer, a reminder of our obsession with measuring the invisible, heat, change, and the fine differences we can't feel until we name them. And on a lighter note, it's National Date Nut Bread Day, a dense, old-school winter staple, perfect for long nights and slow mornings. So today, we mark endurance, quiet genius, and measurement at the darkest point of the year, when the direction has already changed. Today we explored how junk food in the United States is chemically different from the rest of the Western world, why ultra-processed ingredients matter at a population level, and how food policy quietly shapes health long before medicine ever enters the picture. We then unpacked the historical reality behind Donald Trump's claim that Venezuela stole oil assets, showing how decades of nationalization disputes are now being used to justify modern US pressure and escalation. And we close by challenging the myth of the prodigy, reminding us that most greatness doesn't peak early, reflection doesn't have a deadline, and even at the darkest point of the year, the direction has already begun to change. This is Handel for the brief wake-up. Be kind, calm, and curious. Top off that cup and we will catch you next time.